This year's summit of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia has wrapped up in the Tajik capital Dushanbe, with Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech at the summit calling for joint efforts to build a secure, prosperous and inclusive continent. What does the Asia security concept proposed by China mean for a diversified and complex region? And what has this Forum for Dialogue and Consultation on Security Issues been doing to help allay mistrust and prevent regional conflict? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. Cui Hongjian from the China Institute of International Studies and Ms. Zun Ahmad Han, visiting fellow at Belt and Road Strategy Institute of the Tsinghua University. We'll also speak via satellite to Gamba Nadari, columnist with Kaihan International in Tehran, and our correspondent Natalie Carney. She's been following the summit very closely in Dushanbe. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Pandong. Well, dear guest, let me start with the keynote speech Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered at this year's CICA summit. At the beginning of his speech, he mentioned this new Asia's new security concept. Now, Ms. Han, what's your understanding into this new concept? Why it's new?
Well, I think the first thing we need to notice about China's proposition for Asia's security is that it is not based on a Western zero-sum game mentality. When President Xi Jinping talks about Asia's security, stability and prosperity, he mentions that we need to look at multilateralism as the way forward. We need to look into platforms that are consensus-based so that all countries realize that security is not amongst nations, between nations, but a common issue, a challenge that we are all facing. So I think this is the first thing that is very different about this proposition. And secondly, what's interesting is that the Chinese version for security and stability means that we will look at a holistic strategy. That includes trade, it includes cultural interactions, it includes a lot of the mandate that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization also includes. So it's a very different strategy towards stability.
And we'll go through all those contents one by one. But now let me put your country, you're from Pakistan, if I'm right, and into the context here. In terms of security, what do you think is the biggest challenge faced by your country? And what role can CICA play for your country to coordinate and maybe deal with all those challenges?
You know, Pakistan has faced many challenges that were not homegrown, but came from various instabilities in the region. This included foremost the Afghan war, post 9/11, first in the 1980s and then 9/11. Of course, the other issue is with India. We have a tricky relationship with India, which means that on the eastern border, our forces are also occupied. So for Pakistan, the major challenge is in security within the borders. In 2008 was the worst period where terrorist outfits such as the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan were at the highest point and were resulting in a lot of loss of lives. And slowly, because of the National Action Plan and certain effective measures that Pakistan has taken with the help of partners in the region, we've been able to overcome this. However, we still have this problem. We still continue to face the issue of extremism and terrorism within our borders, and the issue is not just for Pakistan to deal with. It is important for the region to understand that everyone together suffers if the situation is not improved. The situation in Afghanistan needs to be addressed effectively by all stakeholders. The trust deficit with India is very important to be addressed. The Kashmir issue is still pending since the partition of India and Pakistan happened. And of course, I do believe that right now the instability because of the Iran nuclear deal can have an impact on the region as well. So Pakistan has been one of the biggest, one of the most badly affected in the region because of various problems that were the consequence of certain bad policies, I would say.
You just mentioned a lot of challenges at hand for CICA members and also for the whole region. Now, Mr. Cui, talking about reaching a consensus, let's remember this is a relatively larger grouping. We know that the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, just wrapped up on Friday yesterday, and it would be more difficult to coordinate among so many member states with different interests. Do you agree?
Yes, I think that we need to maybe go back a little bit about the new security concepts raised by China. it's called common, comprehensive, and cooperative and sustainable. I mean, security should be, achieved by all of the members of Asia. I think we need to find out how could, diversified and complex of this security situation in Asia. Because firstly, it has a, a very, very big diversity of the civilizations, history, and cultures, everything. And also, of course, the different, security concern from different countries. And secondly, in history, as we know, this region has been suffered a lot from the colonialism period. So even we have to face some security problems, security challenges, even as a part of a legacy of that history. So I think that's the reason why China should try to find out a way. We can find out maybe some wisdom from this traditional Chinese medical care, which means that we need to have a systematic,
or holistic approach.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And we need to have a comprehensive consideration. We need to take into consideration about the diversity, the variety, everything. So I think now, for this CECA or some other efforts by China and some other Asian countries, now what we need to do, maybe the first step, just like the CECA mentioned, confidence building, and also we need to have some more integration as a region. So I think that's the reason why now not only SCO, not only CECA, also ASEAN or some other regional organizations or mechanisms, we need to have maybe firstly have some more linkage with them, and also we need to have some dialogue exchange. Finally, I think maybe as the end of the first period of we need to have some common ground firstly, and we need to make clear what's a common threat in security sense.
So having said that, what would you say is the most effective, constructive, and indispensable approach in the whole CECA mechanism right now?
I think firstly, the CECA would be a very, very useful and I think a very potential, efforts to build up the base for mutual trust. Because as we know, the lack of a mutual trust or maybe a linkage would be a very big problem. Because once there are not a linkage or integration, there will be maybe more misunderstanding, and then misleading, and then mistake happened. So I think it would be the first step. Secondly, we need to try to find out perhaps a kind of a crisis management system for regional countries and for regional institutions. For example, our Pakistan guest, as we know, South Asia region, still some security problems, some tensions between countries. So how could we find out a way to build up a kind of the crisis management, also crisis implementation mechanism? I think that would be very necessary as maybe second step.
Having said that, Ms. Han, let me refer you to this notion in President Xi Jinping's speech. He said we should seek universal security and common security. What's the difference and what's the overlapping part of the two ideas?
Between universal security and common security. I think universal security could refer to the fact that we cannot premise our concept of security as opposed to another nation's. This is a very new concept actually, because a lot of countries feel that one life on their side of the border outweighs multiple lives on the other side of the border. We see that in multiple conflicts, more so in the Israel-Palestine conflict as well. So a universal security would mean that humanity has a shared existence, and your security is dependent on the safety of those outside of your borders as well. And common security would mean probably that we cannot define ourselves in opposition with others. We understand that threats we are facing are common. For example, terrorism, extremism, as our Chinese guests, or separatism, and all of us suffer if these are fueled. There were times when certain elements have been planted in certain regions. We saw what happened in the previous decades in the Middle East, the wars in Iraq, Libya, Syria. All of them have not only had implications for the people within those borders, but there was blowback. Now you have a refugee crisis that is not just in Europe but also in the Middle East. You have so many people that need to be uplifted, communities that are in poverty, perishing, and this is a common problem. So we need to understand that humanity needs to be seen as a whole, and the nation-state concept needs to be set aside to some extent if we are to address security effectively.
And talking about some specific challenges, now let's cross live to Mr. Gambar Nadari in Tehran. Well, thank you very much for joining us. So let's start with the current tension between Iran and the United States. Do you think the seeker mechanism can somehow address Iran's concerns?
It should, I think, because what is happening in the Persian Gulf just a couple of days ago, the attacks on two oil tankers, one that belonged to Japan, obviously is affecting the Japanese community thousands of kilometers away. So if we want to have, as your distinguished guest just talked about, universal security and common security, we have to get this out of our system, that if our neighbor's house is burning, it's not going to affect us. No, that is not the case. This is a global village, and whatever is happening in the Persian Gulf and in the Middle East is easily affecting the rest of humanity or the rest of the international community. So I think we need this kind of dialogue between also Iran and its Arab neighbors in the Persian Gulf, because they refuse to talk to each other. They refuse to respect their common interests. They think that whatever is good is only for them, and the rest should suffer. That's precisely the kind of mindset that exists in some of these regional countries, and that is a huge problem. At the same time, they refuse to sit down and talk in places like Sika, or even build one like Sika, and that is also one of the reasons why we have so much problems in our region. At the end of the day, we shouldn't forget the fact that outside powers are also interfering in our regional affairs, and that adds up to the pressure, to the tension, and to the insecurity that exists along each and every border of this volatile region.
So having said that, in reality, do you think all those you just mentioned are reflected in Iran's diplomacy?
What you see is just tip of the iceberg. I think this is a backward region that is based on extremism, tribalism, and of course fanaticism and religious beliefs and values that belong to thousands of years ago. People refuse to contemporize. The governments and politicians use these feelings, these extremist values, in order to agitate their communities and even wage war against their neighbors and their communities. That's precisely what is happening here. Yes, they have iPhones, they have TV screens, they have satellite TV channels and everything, but the mindset is still backward. They refuse to get back to live in the real situation which is now, and they refuse to understand that what they are doing to others is also going to come back and haunt them. So as I told you, because there is no dialogue between these two countries, they don't respect each other's beliefs and values, we have this problem now. I think it is not just Iran. Yes, Iran is not, shouldn't be given a clean hand. I think there are some problems with Iran that needs to be addressed, because this is a multilateral world, and we have to refuse to talk only on our own terms. We need to sit down and respect the views and values of others, but at the same time it has to be based on trust. Iran doesn't see any trust among its regional neighbors. At the same time, Iran refuses to talk to those who are controlling these regional countries, like the United States, and that kind of missing trust and dialogue is the reason that Iran is being accused, is being blamed for everything that is happening in the Persian Gulf, including the attacks on international oil tankers, including the insecurity in Iraq and Syria and Yemen, including attacks on Saudi airports. I mean, everything happens is automatically being directed towards Iran and being blamed on Iran. Why? Because Iran is not on the same page with the United States. Iran is is an independent nation. Iran refuses to be a gopher for the United States, and Iran refuses to be allow America to build a military base along its borders. That is the reason. So I'm afraid I don't think that the security of the region is going to be established anytime soon. I know very well that from the past problems and mistakes of all these countries that we will see more insecurity in the coming months, if not years.
But do you see a possible way out of this?
That's a good question. I think the international community should realize that they cannot sanction Iran and get away with it. It doesn't work that way. The global economy is integrated. We are all part and parcel of this huge package, this universal package of economy, security, and peace. So if you are trying to isolate Iran, that is not going to work, because it is difficult to decouple Iran from the international market of oil or economy. That is not going to happen. So they have to sit down and sort out their differences with Iran through dialogue. They have to stop blaming Iran for everything that happens in the Middle East and beyond. They have to understand that if there is a country that wants to stand on its own feet and not to be on the same page with the United States, it doesn't mean that it is violating international law or the international rules-based order. That is not the case. I think Iran has a lot to offer to the international community. Iran has a lot to offer to regional peace and security. The problem is that they don't treat Iran as an equal partner. They don't look at Iran as an equal partner, and they think that they can push around Iran here and there, and they can also throw it under the bus. But Iran is fighting back. Iran has tools to defend itself, and if there are no oils from Iran that are going to be supplied to the international market, I'm afraid no other country is going to be able to do that. It's either oil for everybody, oil exports for everybody, or no oil export for nobody. That is the end of the case, because this regional water belongs to Iran and the rest of the region, not just for the rest of the region. If they don't want us to sell oil, we won't let them to sell oil. That is the end of it. Why our leader said that I don't value Trump to talk to him or send him a message? Because the problem is that we have signed agreements with the United States. We have signed agreements with the rest of the international community, including China, Russia, and that have been ratified by the UN Security Council. The problem is that America easily walks out. America easily walks out. That is the problem. There is no subjective guarantee that if this time around we trust the American government and give them the benefit of the doubt, and we come up, we sign another agreement with them that they are going to stick to it. I'm afraid that is not going to happen. The serious state of affairs with regard to our nuclear program taught us a bitter lesson that if we want to do away with these pressures and sanctions, we have to stand on our own feet, and we have to walk away from the United States and never sit down at the same negotiating tables with this new administration. Why? Because America cannot be trusted. The same goes to its regional allies. They also listen to America, and they refuse to normalize ties with Iran and to normalize the abnormal, which is the current situation. But as I told you, everybody is paying a price for this, and it is not just Iran.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gamban Nadari in Tehran. So, Mr. Sri, having heard what Mr. Nadari just said, do you get a feeling that multilateralism is winning against a zero-sum game mentality nowadays?
I can get some very impressive sense from your Iranian guests' comments. I think, firstly, the issue about isolation. So as now we are living in a globalized world, but now of course some countries try to use some security instrument, maybe to isolate some countries out from international community. I think it should be out of a trend for the globalization. And secondly, how about the issue of respect? I take a notice that for his speech this time, Mr. Xi stressed the importance of mutual respect, even before the mutual trust. Because also, always mutual trust would be a very, very important precondition for any solution to security challenges. But in Asia, I think very important things. Firstly, we need to find a way to get mutual respect. Mutual respect would be a very strong precondition for mutual trust. And of course, not only among the among the regional countries in Asia. I think a more important thing is any kind of decisions by Asian people, by Asian countries, also should be respected by international community. And also he mentioned how about this intervention from outside. I think now it gives a very, very big trouble in some security issue in Asia. Just like what happened in the Iranian nuclear issue, you can find that the withdrawal of the United States give a very negative impact on this regional security. The third is, how could we find a way is, just like you mentioned, to look for some multilateral solution. For this Iran nuclear deal, we find in the past is a kind of international, solution from other big countries, powers, including China, Russia, United States, and the European countries. But now I think it's time to find out a way to make a balance. Yes, we need to get some international cooperation, but most important thing, we also need to find out a regional solution. For example, once we are more integrated to Asia, once we have some more autonomy, not only in the development and also in security.
Sorry, what about China itself? Because Chinese President Xi Jinping emphasized that China will stick to the path of peaceful development. Why he's been reiterating this in many international occasions recently.
Yeah, I think this time Mr. Xi emphasized Chinese principles on the security issue. But of course, I think now in the perspective of China, the security issue not only security itself. Indeed, it's a kind of a security plus, which means that firstly we need to, of course, to deal with some security issue, but at the same time, we need to find maybe a wider approach to deal with the issue. For example, more development, or kind of more balance of development, which means that which will dismiss some resources of insecurity. So I think now China is trying to find a consensus from other countries in this region. I think maybe in future we do have maybe a good scenario to say that once we have a common ground, common understanding, and then we try to find out the regional autonomy to deal with any security challenges.
Ms. Han, now let's talk a little bit more about this holistic approach, because many observers and analysts are saying that security challenges and poverty as well as underdevelopment closely to deal with the root cause of security challenges. You need to address the very problem of development. What can CICA bring in a solution to this problem?
Well, if you think about the current situation of Asia, we see that because of certain misguided or misled wars, we have a lot of instability, and as you mentioned, the cause of this instability is that people don't have basic means of sustenance. CICA is one platform that can allow Asian nations, covering 90% of Asia, it can be an effective platform for us to identify this as a major cause. Right now what's happening is that nations, as our earlier guests also mentioned, they think it's beneficial in the short term to gain support of the population within their country by creating or spreading hate for another nation or another concept. The problem right now that we are facing is not just the current instability and development challenges because of certain wars, but secondly also the rising polarization, the rising fear within many nations that some other country is trying to threaten their existence, and this is something that needs to be combated. So I think CICA can be an effective platform for us to collectively identify that we need to develop, we need to improve our trade, as President Xi mentioned in his speech as well.
The RCEP.
Exactly. We need to manage our development in a multilateral way so that we have more stake in each other. We don't identify or define each other as opposed to others, but see a common path of progress and development. And secondly, for us to sit together and see that we have to address the issue of polarization. This can be extremely damaging. I will also make another comment that the difference in today's Chinese proposition is that it is not a moralistic one. China or partners of China don't say that they need to determine how countries should govern themselves. This has been a major problem and has created a big trust deficit in Western imperialism and colonization previously.
Do you think this is also the essence of the China proposed Belt and Road initiative?
Yes.
So we know one of the flagship projects is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. What's the real feeling on the ground there? Because let's face it, there are a lot of Western smearing campaign against this project.
There is a lot of campaign against CPEC. You see, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was announced in 2013, but finally identified in 2015. It was a combination of Pakistan's dire needs at that time, which included energy, which included infrastructure, the port of Gwadar, and then the special economic zones. These were things that Pakistan needed to develop but didn't have the finances for. So China came in, and it was China's capability and Pakistan's requirements that became the combination for both countries and became CPEC. So for Pakistan, as for many other countries, the Belt and Road Initiative is not China identifying that Pakistan needs this, or Sri Lanka needs this, or Afghanistan needs this. It's actually based on consensus. It's based on consultation. And in Pakistan, we have a very positive feeling about CPEC also, because not only did it help Pakistan in a time of need, but it doesn't come with political strings attached. And this is a kind of governance that Asians are sick and tired of. We have seen various instability, a lot of wars or interventions in the name of democratization or human rights, and the result is much worse. Millions have died, massacres have occurred in Asia, and those have been called collateral damage. To gain what? What is happening in Afghanistan right now, for instance? What are we trying to achieve in Afghanistan? This is a question we need to ask. There are many critics who say that Balochistan is a province where there's instability, and some apologists of certain attacks that were carried out recently. This is wrong. We need to look at the issues of a country from the lens of development and human prosperity. And the Belt and Road Initiative takes this vision forward.
What's your take on this, Mr. Tsui?
I think so far the BRI itself, I think so far, especially from China's perspective, firstly it's a kind of a geo-economic cooperation. But indeed, I think objectively it will provide some spillover effect and also some products to help the regional stability. Because we know once there are some more prosperity, there are some more growth in the region, certainly there are less, resources for the conflicts between countries or regions. And I think, of course, I think now for China and its partners in Asia, it's good time and also it's critical time to walk the talk. Because we have CECA, we have SCO, we have ASEAN, we have so many mechanisms. But now I think not only because of the pressure from our side, and also from the, internal driving force. I think now it's a good time and a great time to take action.
And now let's turn to a relatively softer side of diplomacy, people-to-people exchanges. President Xi Jinping also mentioned the importance of this in his speech. And Ms. Han, maybe you're the best person to talk about this. Do you think your experience in China is different to your expectation earlier and maybe thought-provoking?
Very thought-provoking. For the first reason is that in China we see a very dynamic global community, in Beijing especially, that is interested in a different path towards development. I think the kind of exposure that me and people like myself are experiencing it changes our own perspective and helps us also empathize with previously communities or nations that we previously were suspicious of. I was just now in Tibet as well, and we were a group of international experts as well as journalists from all over the world, and that experience to see how China is promoting the development as well as the culture in Tibet. This is a good example of the kind of experience the Belt and Road tries to manifest. So for sure, in my personal experience, people-to-people contacts have not only enhanced our understanding of China, but also of a world that's seeking difference.
Thank you very much, dear guests, Ms. Han and Mr. Tsui there. And that's it for this edition of Dialogue on CGTN. I'm Pendong in Beijing. Bye-bye.